Hello friends, welcome to another session of video tutorial on Java. Please subscribe to my channel. To subscribe to my channel, click on the subscribe button and then click on the bell icon so that whenever I post a new video, you get the latest updates. In today's session, we are going to cover how to write simple methods and methods with arguments, methods returning a value, and calling methods inside another method, and finally we will look at recursion. What is a method? Method is nothing but a block of code which gets executed whenever that particular method is called. So when do we use a method? Whenever we need to repeatedly execute a particular set of statements, then we bundle them together and form a method, so that by calling this particular method we get those statements executed repeatedly. So we will see a simple method. So earlier we have seen that a main is also a method. Apart from main, we are going to have different method. Okay, for that I'm going to create a new package. Inside this package I'm going to create a new class. Okay, so simple method enable main. Okay, so this main is a special method which tells the compiler that okay, this is the starting point for any application. Okay, so this is also again a method. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add another method, public static void. Okay, and okay, so now we have two methods. One method which is an entry point. There is another method within this class which is called add. Okay, now inside this I'm going to declare two variables. A is equal to 10 and B is equal to 15. Okay, and then I'm going to add these together and print the sum. Sum is plus A plus B. So I'm going to add them and print the sum. Okay. Now this, okay, since this is the entry point, this cannot be executed directly, right? So how do I call this method here? Call add method from main. So simply add. Okay. So since this is also static and this method is also static, so I can directly call the method here. Okay, so we will cover what is static later on. Okay, for the time being, all the methods which I'm going to make or I'm going to add here will be static. Okay, the static methods can be called directly. This is how I call this add method, which doesn't have any parameters. So there is no parameters and there is no arguments here. Add a bracket here so that it doesn't treat it as a string. Right click, run as Java application, save this. Okay, as you can see the sum is 25. Okay, so this is a user defined method. Okay, so in this we have not taken any argument. So let us add another one here. So public static void and subtract. Okay, so inside this subtract, I'm going to have two input parameters. One is of type integer A, integer B. Okay, so here what I'm going to do is sys out A minus B. Okay, so here difference is plus, again put it in the bracket. Okay, the difference is A minus B. So inside this add we have declared two variables, okay, which becomes a local variable within this particular method, and inside this subtract, okay, this subtract expects two values to be passed from. So this subtract expects two values to be passed in, and it finds the difference here and prints the difference. Okay. To call subtract here, okay, I'm going to call it as I'm going to call subtract here. Call subtract. Okay, so it takes two values which needs to be passed into that particular method. So the first value will be A and the second value will be B. So we are passing the two values here. First value is 20, which gets stored into A, and the second value is 10, which gets stored into a B. Okay, note that add didn't have any parameters to be passed in, but subtract had two mandatory parameters to be passed in. So that is of type integer. So we are passing in integer values here. Okay, so let us save this. Right click and run. Okay, so the difference is 10. So that is A is 20, B is 10, A minus B is 10. Okay, so this is passing the values to a particular method. Okay, another way of doing it is I can also declare int num1 is equal to 20, int num2 is equal to 10, and instead of directly passing the values here, I can pass in num1 which contains value 20 and num2 which contains value 10. Okay, the result will be same. Okay, the result will be same. Okay, so now let us add another method which returns a value. Okay, public static integer multiply, and in here also I am passing two values which will be stored in A and B variable, which is of type integer. Okay, so as you can see, void doesn't return anything back to the calling method. Okay, void doesn't return anything, but here we have to return an integer value. So first thing is I'm going to declare a variable here, a result. So now I'm going to store the multiplied value, which is a multiplied by b. Okay, that value is going to be stored in a result variable, and I'm going to return this back to the calling method. Okay, so since subtract and add was not returning, so we had printed these values inside the method. Since multiply is returning a value back to the method, we can print the value here. Okay, all multiply. Okay, since this is returning a value, I need to store it somewhere. Okay, int ret val. Okay, so ret val is equal to multiply and pass in the value. Okay, so here also I'm going to pass in num1 and num2, which we have declared earlier, followed by semicolon. So this multiply will go and call this method, okay, which in turn returns the result, which is multiplication of these two numbers. Okay, since this is returning, I'm storing it into this particular variable, and I'm going to print it here. Okay, so let me run this. Right click, run as Java application. Okay, the multiplication result is 200. Okay, so this return keyword will return whatever is following it. So that means in my case it is returning the result of this multiplication back to this method here, and once it returns we need to store it somewhere, and then that value can be printed here. So far we have covered a simple method without any arguments, a method which is taking two arguments but not returning anything, and the other method which takes two arguments and also returning an integer value. Okay, so we covered simple method, method with arguments, methods returning a value, and calling methods inside another method. So this we are going to cover now. Suppose say I'm calling all the methods from main method, correct? So if I don't want to call add from here, instead before subtract I want to call add method. So that means within this method I want to call add method. So how do I do it? It's the same way, and call add method. Okay, so I removed add from the main, calling add method from the main, and whenever I call subtract, it is going to go and call the add method also. Okay, so this is nothing but calling a method within another method. Okay, within the subtract method I'm calling the add method. Okay, so let me run this. Okay, see here, sum is 25 and the difference is 10. So if I call it after subtraction, then the subtraction will be first, the subtraction result will be first, and then followed by addition. So let us save this or run this method. See here, the difference is 10 and the sum is 25. Okay, so this is how we can call a method from within another method. Okay, let us look at recursion now. I'm going to create a new class. I'll call it as recursion example. What recursion will do is it will call the same method repeatedly until that condition is met. Okay, so in here I'm going to create a method public static int. Okay, here I'm going to take an example of factorial. What factorial does is suppose I want a factorial of 5. What this will do is this will first multiply the number by subtracting 1, and then again it multiplies the product by reducing it again by 1 until it becomes 1. Okay, so the factorial of 5 is 5 multiplied by 4 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 2 and multiplied by 1. So the result will be 120. Okay, so this is a classic example which can be achieved using a recursive method. Since this is going to return a value of type integer, so I'm making it as public static int, and I'm going to call it as fact and pass in the value integer num. Okay, the first thing is if num equals to 0, then I'm going to return 1. Okay, since the factorial of 0 is 1, else I'm going to return the num multiplied by fact of num minus 1. So this is nothing but a recursive method where first this method will be called from main in my case. Okay, so call fact. Okay, int result is equal to fact, and I'm passing in value of 5 here as an example. So the result gets stored into this result variable. So I'm going to print that value. Okay, so whenever I call this factorial method here, so this will in turn calls the same method itself by reducing the number value by 1. Okay, so this is how, this is nothing but a recursive method. Since this method is being called within that method again and again, so this becomes a recursive method. Let us run this example. Run as Java application. As you can see, the factorial is 120, which is what we got through recursive method. the non-recursive version of this one will be public static int fact non-recursive int num. Okay, so while I is less than 1, this gets repeated. Before that, I'm going to declare a variable called result. Okay, so result, sorry, not I, this num is less than 1, result equals to a result multiplied by number. And here I'm going to initialize the result with num value. After that, num minus reduce the number by 1 and return result. Okay, so instead of calling fact, so I'm going to call fact non-recursive with the same value. Okay, so let me run this again. Run as Java application. Okay, so greater than 1, greater than or equals to 1. Sorry, the result will be equals to 1. Okay. So what I have done here is I have added a non-recursive method. Since it is calling the same method, so this becomes a non-recursive method wherein I have initialized the result. I have declared and initialized the result to 1, and while the number is greater than or equals to 1, I am multiplying the result value with the num value. I am decrementing the num value by 1 and I am returning the result here. And I called, instead of calling fact method, which is a recursive method, I am calling fact non-recursive method by passing the same value. So this is a non-recursive method and this is a recursive method. So we have seen both ways of working with factorial example. One is using recursive and the other one is using non-recursive method. So that is the end of this session.